I've got good news and bad news. Here's the bad news. Most protein bars are packed with sugar and unpronounceable ingredients. The good news? There's a better option. I'm Will, and I created IQ Bar plant protein bars to empower doers like you with clean, delicious, low-sugar brain and body fuel. IQ bars are packed with 12 grams of protein, brain nutrients like magnesium and lion's mane, and zero weird stuff. And right now, you can get 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus free shipping. Try our delicious IQ Bar sampler pack with 7 plant protein bars, 4 hydration mixes, and 4 enhanced coffee sticks. Clean ingredients, amazing taste, and you'll love how you feel. Refuel smarter, hydrate harder, caffeinate larger with IQ Bar.
Go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20 to get 20% off all IQ Bar products plus free shipping. Again, go to eatiqbar.com and enter code BAR20.
He is a retired Texas Ranger. He investigated some of the most prominent, prolific serial cases known to man. He has a new television series on Investigation Discovery Channel, an 8-part series called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger. It's on Tuesday nights on Investigation Discovery and is available streaming on HBO Max. He's coming up on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Welcome to the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. In the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, we are joined by special guests talking about their experiences, the realities of investigating crimes, plus those who have experienced horrendous trauma. Police, first responders, military, and victims of crime share their stories. Hi, I'm John J. Wiley. In addition to being a broadcaster, I'm also a retired police sergeant. Be sure to check out our website, letradio.com, and also like us on Facebook. Search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. Calling us from Texas, we have Jim Holland on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Jim is a retired Texas Ranger. I love the sound of Texas Rangers. We'll talk about that in a few moments. He's also star of the television series on Investigation Discovery Channel called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger. It shows on Tuesday nights. Episodes available to stream on HBO Max. And her website is investigationdiscovery.com. First of all, Jim, thanks for your service. B, thanks for being a guest on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Talk about it. Very much appreciated.
Hey, thank you. I appreciate you having me.
I got to ask this question. It's been a while since I've done Investigative Discovery interviews. Did you ever think you'd be a TV star from being a cop?
No. No.
Most don't.
Never thought it, never inspired to do it.
And the thing was, I was always taught that we shied away from the camera as much as possible. And that goes, I'd imagine, the same for you.
Yeah, through my career, specifically with the Rangers, our creed was kind of, always to stay behind the scenes, lead from behind. Randy Prince was a former senior Ranger captain, and that was his big motto is you didn't want to put yourself out there in the press or, put yourself out there in general. We're more effective if people don't actually generally know we're working on things. So, yeah, that was always a goal. It was never to get out in the media. And, for the most part, you won't see Rangers doing interviews. And throughout my career, I think I can think of 2 interviews that I did, and that was to push a case forward and look for new leads. I
was interviewed, and by the way, we were always taught that we had public information officers. They handled most of the interviews. It's very rare we did interviews, but one I got interviewed by Oprah Winfrey when she was a news anchor for WJZ 13 in Baltimore. I'm sure she doesn't remember. It was a big deal to me, not to her.
That would be one I'd want a picture of.
That would be as a long time ago. Trust me, I had a lot of color in my hair back then. Now it's pure white. Jim, and the other thing was, we were taught that it's not about you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We're taught that it's not about you. It's about the agency. It's about the case. It's about the victims.
Exactly. Yes, 100%. And, Rangers were interesting as law enforcement goes. You were former Baltimore PD and you have original jurisdiction over, homicides that occur in the city. For the most part, Rangers are stepping in to help other agencies.
Right.
We're the assisting agency. And, if we're helping a local PD or a sheriff's department, then our goal is that everything goes through that sheriff or that chief of police, and we're there to help. We're not there to get out in front of the media. It's not our goal to hold a press conference. And like I said, you really, I can't think of too many times that you've ever seen that in my career that I can remember where, Rangers are out there in front of the podium.
Got to ask you this question, and I don't know much about Texas policing, but I do know the Texas Rangers. I'm aware of them, and there's a certain cachet. There's a certain bravado that goes with the name of Texas Ranger. Did you feel that calling when you were a youngster?
It's an interesting story. I read a book when I was very young, probably like 7, 8 years old, about the Texas Rangers, and that was the first time that I'd ever heard of them. I found the book very interesting. I think I actually kept the book from the library, which probably should admit to.
Right.
But I never thought about it or looked back on it until I graduated college and I got into law enforcement, and it was. No, I mean, I guess it's kind of a strange thing to say, but it was never my goal to be a police officer. It was never my goal to be a Texas Ranger. I got a great job out of college. I worked for a Fortune 500 company. I made great money, but there was something missing in my life, and I kind of felt this calling to help others, to be involved with community and do something, for the greater good. And that's ultimately, why I became a state trooper in Texas. Through the ranks of the troopers, I don't think there's too many people that work for the Texas Department of Public Safety that don't ultimately strive to make Ranger. But I love being a trooper. I had a great time on the road. I really didn't want to promote, but I promoted through the ranks anyway. But I loved, going beyond the initial traffic contact. I loved criminal interdiction, arresting criminals, warrants, loads of dope, guns, taking bad guys off the street. I mean, to me, that was a blast. But it just kind of evolved into the Rangers, and there was a point in my career where I decided I felt like, I really wanted to take that next step and start doing homicide investigations.
Well, and it's a transition. That cowboy hat's got to have something to do with it.
Yeah. Well, troopers in Texas can have cowboy hats too.
We didn't have cowboy hats in Baltimore. Not
completely, but yeah, the cowboy hat doesn't hurt.
Here's two things, and before you get into your story, number one, you don't sound like you're from Texas, and number two, you don't sound like Sam Elliott.
No. I'm originally from west of Chicago, grew up and raised there, and then went to school at the University of Louisville in Kentucky. So migrated to Texas, got here as soon as I could, and once I stepped foot on it and had the eyes of Texas on me, I couldn't get away.
That's funny because you would think a Chicago boy would not wind up in Texas. They wind up doing law enforcement in Illinois. And by the way, it didn't sound like you came from a law enforcement background.
No, not at all. No, I can't think of anyone who I'm related to who was in law enforcement in any way, shape, or form. And it was never a career path that I thought about. It was never anything that I looked at. I mean, it's kind of a strange thing. Like I said, I stepped out and I found success in business and made money in business. It just, something was lacking, that weird calling. I don't know that I can explain it other than I just felt like I needed to help people.
One of the things that a lot of people don't seem to get is, and I don't profess to be an expert in Texas policing, but everybody that's a Texas Ranger pretty much starts as a Texas DPS or state trooper. Am I wrong?
Yeah, it's a requirement. So at a minimum, you have to have 8 years with the you have to have 4 years with the Texas Department of Public Safety and then 8 years in total law enforcement. So everyone starts out the same way, wearing Texas tan on the side of the road, driving a black and white. Some people can progress a little bit faster, but in general, if you want to make the ranks a Ranger, you're probably 8 to 20 years into your career before you get there.
And the reason I bring that up is we had a lot of people, and I still get this periodically, and I laugh when people ask this and they say, oh, my plans, I'm going to college, then I'm going to police academy, then I'm a homicide detective. I'm like, yeah, it doesn't quite work like that, pal. You got to earn your chops. Yeah,
and and that's definitely the way of the Rangers. there's no really rookie rangers. Your rookie is a person who's been out there for 12 years, and in the Rangers, it's actually an appointment. I mean, you go through a promotion process, but the reality is it's an appointment. But what they're looking for is people that bring something in, and they're not trying to teach someone to be a cop, right? They're going to train them some more, and they're going to help them, but they're really looking for someone with a skill set, drive, work ethic, who's proven themselves, whether it's on the side of the road in black and white, whether it's in
gotta prove yourself. We're talking with Jim Holland. He's retired Texas Ranger. He's also a star of the Investigative Discovery Channel series called Killer Confessions: Case Files of a Texas Ranger on Tuesday nights, and they're available streaming on HBO Max. When we return, we're going to talk about a couple cases. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back.
How would you like a free ebook on tips to improve your health? We're talking about tips you can use for free to add years to your life. Best of all, the ebook is free to download at lethealthy.com. When we say free, we mean free, so you can download the free ebook to improve your physical health, all while preserving your financial health. Get the ebook for free today at lethealthy.com. That's at lethealthy.com. Again, the website is lethealthy.com.
Contest from Texas. We have Jim Holland, retired Texas Ranger, also television star. He's kind of a big deal. He won't tell you that. He is star of the Investigation Discovery series Killer Confessions: Case Files of a Texas Ranger on Tuesdays on Investigation Discovery Channel. Episodes available to stream on HBO Max, and our website is investigationdiscovery.com. I took a look at a couple of some of the cases, number one, Jim, and number two, I got to ask this before we get into the first case that you preview on your show. How did you wind up specializing in homicides? That's not an area of police work a lot of people are really good at.
Stepping into the Rangers, that's primarily what Rangers do, homicides, major felonious investigations. And that was the need in the area that I went to. It's funny because my boss, the guy who chaired my promotional committee, who basically decided, where I was going to go, said I found a really special spot for you, and, there's lots of murders, and I know you're going to excel at it. And, they kind of matched me up with this spot, I guess, based on my personality drive or what they felt like I would be really good in. And, it was just busy. It was crazy busy, nonstop experience. And I mean, that was just kind of, it ended up being my calling, I guess, at the end of the day, is those were the cases I enjoyed working and the ones that I excelled at.
Let's go to a couple of cases. Number one, I looked at your website, investigationdiscovery.com's website, and Pathologic Evil is the first episode. What can you tell us about that?
Sure. It's a series of murders, 4 out of Oklahoma and Texas, Dallas area and Houston area. And they rotate around a guy named William Reese, who ultimately ends up being a serial killer. And it's a story of how that case started in 1997 and how ultimately it was solved in 2016 with confessions and William Reese actually leading us to 2 of the victims' remains that had been buried for, roughly 20 years.
And what part did you play in this investigation?
So my primary role was to go in and interview William Reese. He'd been interviewed throughout. He was actually in prison at the time for a separate kidnapping that occurred in Houston, and people had made runs at him throughout the years, roughly 20 years, nonstop. He was a suspect in multiple murders, but he'd never admitted culpability into anything. He was tried and convicted on the Sapah kidnapping case, and he was sitting there for about 20 years when I went in and talked to him. But my goal was to get him to talk, to see what he would say. We had 2 missing victims. We had a young 12-year-old girl that had disappeared for a month and was ultimately found, and we had 1 victim that was found shortly after her death. But there was, there was no answers, just kind of a thought process of, there's real probability that this guy did it. We went through forensics, and there were some things that matched up, but it wasn't enough to arrest him on. It wasn't enough to go to trial. A lot of it was fiber evidence that the district attorney's office had refused to look at or refused to accept, basically. So they asked me to go in there and make a run at the guy.
One of the things that, two things, actually. One is, and my wife, who I met years after retiring from police work, and we watch these shows, and I don't watch a lot of them anymore, but we watch these shows, and they have the interview room, and they have the so-called bad guys, and watch what they'll do. When they leave them, the guilty guy will take a nap. He'll go to sleep. The innocent guy will be pacing the floors, and almost inevitably, 9 times out of 10, that's what happens. Is that the case with you?
Man, with me, so I deal with some really, really weird stuff. Serial killers, dismemberment, ritualistic killings.
They're a different breed. They're totally different.
I mean, there's. Oh, I'm sorry?
They're totally different than your average killer.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I progressed to at the end of my career. I would say in general with your everyday homicide, which I don't know of another way to say it other than that, your non-serial killer, non-ritualistic killing, I think you see people that confess and they, the weight of the world is lifted off them. Maybe they break down, maybe they cry, but you can just see everything changes after that. They deal with it for a second and they get better. Psychopaths, sociopaths, your true, serial killers, they're just completely different because it doesn't affect them in the same way. They don't think about it. They don't have morals. And a lot of times, I mean, you might get a second of crying or something like that. For the most part, they snap out of it and kind of go back to the same personality or maybe a happier personality. It's really bizarre to see their transition.
The other thing that's difficult is, and most of the people I encountered, they were not hardcore criminals. Or if they were, they weren't experienced. You had serial killers that have been doing this for a long. I know he's Ted Bundy example. Ted Bundy, a lot of people don't realize his last murder that he was caught for and executed for happened in Florida, a small town in Florida, Lake City, Florida. But he had years of practice and training, and he had it down. And then you add into it someone's been in prison for a long time. You had to go in this interview with, you know what you want to accomplish, and he's not going to give it to you.
Right. Yeah. You go in mission oriented, and Samuel Little, for example. Samuel Little is a guy who killed for 40 years and didn't get caught. 93 victims. That's someone who knows his craft, right? These aren't your everyday knuckleheads. I mean, these are really, really smart people, generally geniuses. They put a lot of thought process into it. They're very careful of what they do. A lot of times they plan, and then it's not their first rodeo, right? If you look at serial killers and you generally look at their first murder, and you're going to see an extremely disheveled crime scene, but they learn and they get better, and you see this perfection, and they stop making the same mistakes. In general, if you're looking for a serial killer, my thought process is, if you can find the first series in the murder, and you're hoping for some type of forensics, that's generally the one that's going to get you home.
Another thing before we go to a break and we go in the next case is. I'm no expert in homicide investigation. One thing I do say is stranger on stranger murders are very rare and very hard to solve. And most serial killers are stranger on stranger crimes, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, they're not grabbing the next door neighbor. They're generally stalking prey. They're predators. I mean, they travel around and they look for the person that they can get to fairly easily and that they can get away from. A lot of times they have a really specific victim MO, and they're studying these people, and they're really watching them and waiting for the right moment. And back to William Reese, he was one that had a very specific MO, and he was looking for a certain type of age and a certain type of young girl and hair color and height and weight, and he'd sit there and basically stalk them and do the work to find them when they're vulnerable.
We're talking about Jim Holland. He's a retired Texas Ranger. He is also star of the television series on the Investigation Discovery Channel called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger on Tuesday nights. Episodes available to stream on HBO Max, and our website is investigationdiscovery.com. This is Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Don't go anywhere. We will be right back. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and be sure to click like. Contact from Texas. We have Jim Holland, a retired Texas Ranger on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. He is the star of the Investigative Discovery series, Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger, on Tuesday nights on Investigation Discovery Channel. Episodes are available to stream on HBO Max, and our website is investigationdiscovery.com. Before we go into the second case, Jim, that we're talking about, I got to say this. There's a lot of things about police work I don't talk about. And because a lot of people, it's almost as if it's like they're interested until they start finding out details, and they're like, I don't want this is more than I want to hear. Do you encounter like, this is a strange cat because he's talking about stuff that is far-fetched and they don't believe?
Yeah, I guess, I don't share the intimate details of very many of these cases, and definitely not, a whole lot outside of law enforcement. I think there's things that people don't want to hear, and that kind of explodes their brain, and diving really, really deep into some of these serial killers' heads is, I think, too much for most people. I just don't think. I mean, I was asked to describe, has Hollywood ever portrayed it the right way, or what movie's the best? And no, they haven't. I mean, I think you have to sit in a room with these people, and when they start opening up and listen to what they say and the way they say things, and kind of look into their eyes to really understand how twisted and messed up they are. But it's really difficult to discuss evil in that way. I mean, how moralistically deprived an individual can be, the things that they can do, and the pleasure they take out of it. I don't think people really understand that. I think it's hard to grasp. Maybe that's a good thing for society. I think it is, and it's a bit of a culture shock for me. And one of the things I tell people all the time, especially I was raised by my mother. My dad was in the Navy. He was gone all the time. I have 4 younger sisters, and one thing I learned early on in police work is that women are prey for a lot of predators, and a lot of these serial killers are predators. They don't do crimes of opportunity. They stalk their victims, and they pick out and they have it all planned out, don't they? Yeah, I mean, kind of like I said before, if you're going to find a disheveled crime scene with a serial killer, it's going to be, the first one, the one that was more spontaneous. But in general, you're going to see them, really plan things out and make decisions, or at least if they haven't, surveil the victim in advance, they at least have a specific type of MO. When they see this type of person in this certain location, then they're going to abduct them. But yeah, I mean, they're animals. A friend of mine, kind of describes society as there's lambs and there's, wolves and there's sheepdogs, and, they're the wolves that are out there just kind of walking around looking for the easy prey. They're looking for that victim. And unfortunately, the majority of time that ends up being, women and, young children. I mean, it's horrible to think of that people are out there like this, but they are. Yeah. And they're, unfortunately, you talk about the number of how many serial killers are there. I mean, good Lord, who knows? Who could fathom that number? I mean, if you go back and look at people again, Samuel Little killed 93 over 40 years. How many more are out there like him? How many truck drivers? How many, pedophiles that are running around doing that? I mean, it's really kind of scary to think about. I think that in law enforcement, I think we've gotten better, but the reality is we've maybe touched the top of the iceberg. I mean, just like barely. I mean, there's so much more out there.
Let's talk about your second case that's previewed on the show. Lie, cheat, and kill. What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Crystal McDowell. She was a very successful realtor, mother of two, located just outside of Houston, Texas, and she basically disappears in the hurricane, and they find her car a couple days later. And ultimately, the sheriff's department at the time, Houston is flooded. They're completely destroyed by saving people in neighborhoods, dealing with flood issues, blocking roads, and everything like that. And they asked the Rangers to come in and help out on the case. Initially, there's 3 suspects that were developed, and I was called in and asked to help on the case.
And you obviously narrowed it down to the one killer. Am I wrong about that?
Yeah, ultimately we kind of sorted through a list of suspects and came up with one that I felt was more likely to have committed the crime, and then set up a series of interviews and started working with him. And it became apparent, I think, fairly early on that he committed the murder. It was then, proving the case. And more than anything, we didn't have a body. And in Texas, can you prosecute someone on a murder without a body? Yeah, you can go to trial and you can win a conviction on it as well. But in general, those cases, get tossed. And, our goal was to figure out if there was any chance that this woman was still alive, obviously to save her. And if not, to at least, recover her remains and give her family some type of answers.
Were you able to do that?
Yeah, ultimately, it's a really interesting case because the hurricane had wiped out Houston. There was no electricity. Everything was flooded. There was no hotels. So I pretty much worked the case for a week out of my truck, heating up beanie weenies and a Bunsen burner on my tailgate for food a lot of times. But through a series of interviews through the week, the victim's ex-husband ultimately confessed and then led us to the body, and we were able to recover her remains, which were in an area that had been infested by alligators. So luckily, we were able to get there before the body disappeared.
By the way, you didn't have alligators in Chicago, but you have them in Texas, right?
We did not. We only had bears in Chicago. Yeah,
bears. We're not talking about the football bears, because there were years where they were not very good. This guy that killed this woman in the lie, cheat, kill case was not a serial killer. This was someone that was known to the victim.
Yeah, it was, her ex-husband, and they were actually living together at the time of the murder. It was a rather bizarre relationship. He was, he was kind of borderline sociopathic, psychopathic. There was no remorse. I felt strongly, if he ever had the opportunity, even after being, tried and convicted and sentenced to prison for pretty much the rest of his life, I'm convinced that if he had the opportunity to do the whole thing over again, he would. He was a different nut. He was interesting. And, in law enforcement, a lot of homicide investigations, I would say probably the majority of them that end up in confessions, it's based on someone feeling bad, someone not being able to sleep, and it's based on detectives talking to that person about their remorse. I mean, it's not human nature to kill someone, right? We feel bad about that. And that generally is how most detectives get confessions. The difference is when you're dealing with, sociopathic or psychopathic personalities, there's no moral compass. There's no remorse. They don't feel bad about anything. And that's really who Stephen McDowell was. He was this guy that didn't feel bad about what happened. So, yeah, it was very challenging.
We're talking with Jim Holland. He's retired Texas Ranger, originally from the Chicago area, wound up in Texas. That's a long story, which we'll return to in a few moments. And he became a television star. He is a star of this series on Investigation Discovery Channel called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger, on Tuesday nights on Investigation Discovery Channel or ID Channel. Episodes available to stream on HBO Max. Their website is investigationdiscovery.com. When we return, we'll talk about long-term and the effects on him and his family. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Someone asked, what's the catch? What's the cost? There is no cost for anything on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast website, letradio.com. letradio.com. Again, that's letradio.com.
Your software needs to be compliant to win deals, but you also need your engineers focused on building your product, not pulling SOC 2 evidence. Enter a third option. Make Vanta your first security hire. Vanta uses AI and automation to get you compliant fast, simplify your audit process, and unblock deals so you can prove to your customers that you take security seriously. Plus, Vanta scales right along with you, backed by support that's there when you need it every step of the way. That's why top startups like Cursor, Linear, and Replit use Vanta to get and stay secure. Don't SOC block your best engineer. Set them free and get compliant fast with Vanta. Get started at Vanta.com.
We'll turn our conversation with Jim Holland on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Jim is a retired Texas Ranger. He is the star of the television series on Investigation Discovery Channel called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger, on Tuesdays on Investigation Discovery Channel. And his episodes are available stream on HBO Max. Their website is investigationdiscovery.com. So, Jim, how long have you been retired now from the Texas Rangers?
I'm going on about 3 years now.
You're still a rookie. I've been retired since 92. I got hurt and retired very young. And I was jokingly said that's when my problems always started. The reason I want to ask you is you investigated homicides. I was a patrol sergeant when I got hurt and retired. I had a lot of homicides. I was not a homicide detective. I didn't spend a lot of time with the people, the killers. But I carry around stuff that still bothers me. And I'll be honest with you, my wife's like, we're going out to dinner with so-and-so and so-and-so. And whatever they do, you don't talk about this. I'm like, okay, I'm not the guy you want to invite to barbecues. I kind of feel like you may not be the guy you want to invite to barbecues either.
Yeah, you don't want to give me a beer and loosen me up.
I would imagine.
Try to avoid telling those stories. That definitely wouldn't be what I need to do.
And I'm also very much self-aware that, and a lot of my guests, we laugh and laugh. We say we're dinged up, we're damaged goods. It's not like we're useless. We know we're not useless, but we know we're not like we were 18. How would you describe yourself today?
Yeah, I mean, I still try to stay involved, do consulting, helping agencies, helping rangers, helping district attorneys' offices. I try not to do interviews too often anymore, but I still step in the box and do interviews. I think you can retire, but you really have a difficult time completely stepping out of it. I think it's more of a transition.
It is.
My take is people that are cops, I mean, real cops, people that love their job and really work hard, that, it's a calling and it's a hard thing to step away from. And when you leave, you've got to find a way to fill that void. And generally what I see is people still helping their community, whether they're volunteering or reserving or doing things. It's always, about helping others.
Well, that's one of the reasons why I did this radio show, because I felt I needed to find a platform for people to tell our stories, because we don't get a lot of publicity. We don't talk. And by the way, we've relied on the media for far too long to tell our stories, and now they're so biased it's not even close to the truth. And the ID channel and the Investigation Discovery Channel is one of the few that really gets it as close as possible. Before we get into your journey, I agree with you wholeheartedly. You got to find something else to do, but I firmly believe that policing is for the younger people. How would you describe yourself?
I think, well, number one, I think 110% you're correct. It's a young person's game. I mean, I can't imagine being out on patrol or being on the street, in my late 40s or 50s. I mean, there's a shelf life on it. And I think there's a shelf life on the opposite end of that for homicide people. And that's more of the shelf life is involving your brain and what you can endure and what you can take and how long you can kind of stay standing in the murky water. some of these rooms, people ask me, what it's like afterward. And, I talk about, if there was a bleach that you could use to sterilize your brain, to remove these things, that would be a really good thing, because, there's a drawer, right? And someone opens it up and you look in and, there's no going back from that point. You don't erase these things. Homicide scenes, kid scenes, that's stuff that it never comes out of your brain. You gotta figure out a way to deal with it.
If there was some detergent that could scrub your brain, I'd be first in line for that. And by the way, what does help me is getting older. I forget a lot of things, but they're never totally gone. Sometimes they show up when I don't want them to.
Yeah, that's with me. If it's interesting because and people ask me when I was a ranger, well, how did you deal with it? You went home at night. How did you sleep? How did you deal with it the next day? The reality is I was so busy, I didn't have time to deal with it, because it was from one murder to the next, one scene to the next. It was just nonstop. There was never downtime. The danger with retirement is after 27 years, you have your first downtime. And I think that's when it starts sinking back in. And I actually worried about that a little bit when I retired. If I slow down and these things come back into my head. There's just things that you don't want to relive, and there's things that you don't want to think about again. But yeah, it's impossible to stop, and generally it's mind-numbing stuff. You're out driving somewhere and not thinking about anything, and all of a sudden something pops back in your head.
And by the way, I purposely avoid a lot of dash cam videos, a lot of police videos, and I did one recently for a radio interview, and I told the guy I don't watch these because quite often it takes me right back, and it takes a long time to return to my center. But I did watch his video for the sake of the interview. So there's things I do. Do you find yourself doing things differently? And I'm getting into, how does one make the jump from policing into being a television star and talking about it?
I think in a way that's part of twofold. One, I think it's part of the healing process. You have things that you've lived through, but I think more importantly, it's part of why I became a police officer, which was helping others. And to me, in what we see in kind of polarized America today is I think there's, a far left side and a far right side. And unfortunately, law enforcement tends to be on the wrong side, a lot of times, or at least captured in the press. But I want people to understand that, cops are out there doing good. There's evil. There's bad people. There is serial killers. There's murderers. There's child molesters. There's horrible, horrible people out there. And law enforcement is there to help us and get these evil people, off the street. So for me, this is a way to make sure that people don't forget about the victims and people don't forget about the families, and they don't forget about the killers. And I don't mean in a good way, but I mean, you know where your kids are going. You watch them. You know who they're with. You have perceptual vigilance. If you're a girl and you want to go running, you make sure that it's in a well-lighted area. You go with people. You have a body alarm. You carry mace. You do something that will give you some type of defense. But as horrible as it sounds, I want people to realize that there's predators out there. There's people that are trying to hurt you. There's people that are trying to kill you. And yeah, I think we need to be vigilant against them, and we need to support law enforcement in their functions and their actions to apprehend these people. We need more money for forensic genealogy. We need more money for DNA testing. We need more money to train homicide investigators better.
And we're going to your television series now. It's called Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger, Tuesdays on Investigation Discovery Channel. Episodes available to stream on HBO Max. By the way, I can't tell you the last time I talked to someone. You might be the first time in almost 10 years I talked to someone that's on HBO Max.
Well, hopefully you subscribe, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, well, the thing is, and my wife is probably howling, if I say this, right now, howling with laughter. I don't think of myself as a big deal, but and I jokingly say I have a wife who brings me back down to earth. Do you have that same thing in your life so you don't wind up becoming too big-headed?
Yeah, I think I'm completely and totally surrounded by people like that. especially Rangers, the men and women that I work with in law enforcement, they're pretty good at keeping you grounded. I mean, you know how cops are.
Oh, yeah.
Ripping on each other.
They're always best.
I
They're
think
busting you know what.
The more that people work to make sure that your head stays down on the ground.
Well, Jim, thanks for your service, and thanks for talking about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated. By the way, this is Jim Holland, retired Texas Ranger. He's star of the Investigation Discovery series, Killer Confessions, Case Files of a Texas Ranger, on Tuesdays on ID channel. Episodes available to stream on HBO Max, and the website is investigationdiscovery.com. Again, thanks for your service, and thanks for talking about it on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. Both very much appreciated.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Of all the radio stations in the United States, there are no other shows like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. And on Facebook, there's only one official page. Do a search on Facebook for the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show, and be sure to like the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show Facebook page. I'd like to thank our guests for coming on the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show. The Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show is a nationally syndicated weekly radio show broadcast on numerous AM and FM radio stations across the country. We're always adding more affiliate stations. If you enjoyed the podcast version of the show, which is always free, please do me a favor and tell a friend or two or three. I'll be back in just a few days with another episode of the Law Enforcement Talk Radio Show and podcast. Until then, this is John J. Wiley. See ya.
If you like the show, please take a moment to rate, review, and subscribe. It really does help the show to grow. Thank you for listening.